Hey everybody, I'm gonna talk you through your first online lesson here on roles and energy transfer. So you should have the notes paper that goes along with this presentation. If you want to do them while you listen, if you want to go back and fill it in later, totally up to you. Okay, so this video will be real quick, just talking about some of these concepts. A lot of them should be review for most of you though. Okay, so a couple questions you should be able to answer by the end. How does energy flow through an ecosystem? How do organisms get energy? How's energy transferred? How do food webs and food chains work, and how do they show energy connections? And how are organisms connected by food webs, global food webs? Okay, so first off, here, how do organisms get energy? So let's keep in mind there are three different types of organisms. The first type of organism is a producer. They're also known as autotrophs. Remember that auto means self and troph means energy. So these are things that get energy by themselves. They do that through photosynthesis. Remember, they're making glucose through photosynthesis. When that glucose is broken down, it makes chemical energy that we called ATP. All that should be a review for you. Examples are green plants, algae, and some bacteria. Okay. Remember that these organisms are supplying energy for all other organisms, and they get that energy from the sun. Or light in general, but usually from the sun. And that's where the process of photosynthesis is really important. And that's why we said way back when we did photosynthesis, without all of these plants that photosynthesize, without producers, nothing else would be alive. Okay, the next type of organism is a decomposer. Remember, they get energy by breaking down the remains of other organisms, fungi, bacteria. These are some examples. These are important because they're moving those nutrients and things, those materials back into the soil and making them available for other organisms. So we don't just have like dead leaf matter laying around a forest floor. It's breaking down, might be slow, but it breaks down so that it doesn't just sit there. Otherwise, we'd have piles and piles and piles of dead plant matter and animal matter everywhere. And then the last one that we're usually most, I don't know, familiar with, are consumers. Remember, they eat other organisms. They're also known as heterotrophs because they get their energy from different sources. They don't make it themselves. There's three types of consumers. There's herbivores that eat only plants. There's carnivores that eat only meat, and there's omnivores that eat plants and meat. And then scavengers are a special kind of consumer that feed off of dead organisms. I would still consider them carnivores, but they're kind of a specialized type of consumers. So they kind of get their own special category. Okay. Now, this energy is transferred among organisms. So, all this energy is made from producers and it moves into consumers. And it's transferred in organisms. And we show that transfer through two graphics or two picture type things. One is food chains. Food chains show the path of energy from producer to consumer. The energy in a food chain is only moving in one direction. So you're going to see we go from our producer to our primary consumer to our secondary consumer and to our tertiary consumer. And the arrows are what show our flow of energy. So remember, we've got our producer, and then this is our consumer, okay? It's our first consumer, so we call it a primary consumer. Usually that's an herbivore. Then we have some type of carnivore or omnivore next, and we call that a secondary consumer. And after the secondary consumer, we have a tertiary consumer. Most tertiary consumers are carnivores. Very rarely are they omnivores. I mean, pigs are a type of omnivore that are a tertiary consumer. Humans are a type of omnivore. Usually, we have a lot more carnivores in here, though. Omnivores are pretty rare. Food webs are just really complex food chains. So, food webs show feeding relationships among organisms in specific ecosystems, and those food webs are made up of a whole lot of different food chains. Again, we've got the arrows showing the flow of energy, but notice in a food web, the arrows are going all over the place. You know, you've got them going here, they go back, they go up. One's going this way, this one's going this way. It looks a little messier, but it shows an ecosystem so much more accurately. How the energy isn't just like if we go back a slide here and we look at just this food chain, it's not just this nice la 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 flow. It's kind of this crazy, like all this stuff is flowing all over the place. So it's much more accurate. Although it might be overwhelming to look at, it's much, much more accurate. Okay. And these food webs interact with each other, and that is really, really important. If you remove one tiny thing from a food web, if you remove, let's say, the spiders from this food web, that's going to have a really big effect on the entire food web because the insects then might get overpopulated because they have one less predator. The toads will have one less food source. Okay, so they might drop in population, which is going to cause the snakes to not have as much to eat and the owls to not have as much to eat, right? So, just removing one organism can really have an effect on the entire food web. And these food webs are all connected. Okay, so we have these things called global food webs. And global food webs are food webs that begin on land and webs that begin in the water, and how those land webs and water webs interact with each other. So, this is a good example here, just showing the interactions between certain organisms. It's color coded, which I like, but it's showing how even these organisms that live in the water can still affect these organisms that live on land. And that connection between the land food webs and the water food webs are what we call global food webs, right here, global food webs. And those global food webs affect the entire globe and in turn affect entire ecosystems. Okay? Listen, those are the notes for this whole section. So go back and watch this as many times as you want. You're going to fill in that note sheet, and then I want you to continue working through the folder. And hopefully, I will talk to you guys soon. See ya.